The sun develops spots that are about the size of Earth, and they change in intensity and number over time. According to NASA, these sunspots provide a standard gauge of solar activity. That activity rises and falls in 11-year cycles. The next one begins this year, and the current solar activity forecast calls for the weakest in the last 200 years. Astrophysicist Dr. Jeff Zwirink of Reasons to Believe spoke with CBN News about the correlation between sunspots and weather on Earth.
If it continues to drop, one thing we do know is that sunspots, they look at like dark spots on the sun. So you'd initially think, oh, maybe that's because there's less radiation given off. It turns out because of the magnetic fields going on in there, the sunspots actually emit more radiation. And so if there are fewer sunspots, we're receiving less sunlight from the sun. And so you would expect to see a continual decline in temperatures, that things might get colder over the next 10 or 15 years.
According to the New American, more and more scientists believe this lower solar cycle could spark a lengthy period of minimum solar activity, leading to cooler temperatures on Earth. It's happened before. From the mid-1600s to the early 1700s, the sun experienced a period of low solar activity known as the Maunder Minimum. It corresponded to a time on Earth known as the Little Ice Age.
We know from historic records, and these are very early observations of the sun, that there were very few of these sunspots for a very long period, from about 1650 until 1715. And this particular period of low solar activity also correlates with a period where the climate, at least in most of Europe and in other places of the world, was very cold.
So what they noticed is, primarily in Europe, where they were taking a lot of these measurements, what they found is that the temperatures were really cold.
It was also very cold in North America. Colonial art often shows deep snows and ice-filled rivers during the winters. Zwirink says the bottom line is if the sunspot activity continues to drop off, we're going to experience cooler weather for a while. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Subscribe to our channel, press the bell icon and never miss an update from Latestly.
This is Skywatch Media News for July 3rd, 2019. Here's what's happening. According to model findings by astrophysicist Valentina Zarkova, our sun is about to enter into a deep solar minimum that will last for decades. With the release of this presentation, Zarkova clarifies her new findings on the super grand minimum cycle. Her calculations featured in the June publication of Nature match up with the timelines of the Maunder minimum. They do so with clear and precise accuracy. So why is this most recent prediction so important? The Earth is witnessing increased unstable weather patterns, prolonged major floods, massive crop failures, and wild swings in temperature, among other extreme events, including high-level volcanic eruptions. These events suggest that we are heading into a time of great and long-lasting changes on our planet. The Maunder minimum is the time period around 1645 to the year 1715, during which sunspots became exceedingly rare. It roughly coincided with the middle part of the Little Ice Age, during which Europe and North America experienced much lower temperatures. NASA and the NOAA are also forecasting very low sunspot activity for solar cycle 25, the lowest in 200 years. But the NOAA forecast is more modest in predicting its time frame, suggesting that the solar minimum will last for years rather than decades, as was predicted by Zarkova in the June issue of the Nature publication. Looking at this chart by independent solar researcher David Birch, it appears that we are already near the Dalton minimum levels that occurred back in the 19th century. If this trend continues, then we may be in the thrust of a solar minimum that could last for many decades. The total solar eclipse that occurred in South America on July 2nd was nothing short of spectacular. Although solar eclipses can happen a few times a year, total solar eclipses are a rarity. The next eclipse isn't due to take place until December of 2020, with the path of totality again cutting across Chile and Argentina. Here are a few amazing images of the total eclipse in the Southern Hemisphere. At the same time as the solar eclipse was passing over Argentina and Chile on July 2nd, a massive hurricane was brewing in the eastern Pacific Ocean, and satellite cameras tracking the path of the eclipse have caught both. The eclipse began over the South Pacific east of New Zealand as the moon moved in between Earth and the sun. The path of totality then made its way east across the ocean, finally making landfall on the coast of Chile and moving across Argentina, treating residents to a rare and spectacular sight. Meanwhile, a major hurricane was percolating above the Pacific Ocean north of the equator and just west of Mexico. Hurricane Barbara, which was officially declared a Category 4 storm with winds up to 130 miles per hour. These are very interesting times in which we live. So stay informed, keep your mind focused on what's important, and keep looking to the sky.